This is my demo for our Lesson 6 project on urban flooding. I'll start by showcasing the base map in our services directory, and I'll scroll down so you can see the different layers and scales that I used. Overall, I used 6 scales, going down to about 4,500. I just felt that that was the largest scale that was needed in order to identify urban flooding locations. And here is the future server. This is the urban flooding sites that we'll be editing and adding to our application. And this is what they look like. This is an ArcGIS Online, and just use these kind of bright red asterisks. I did include a date field. I just felt that was appropriate. So when entering this information, you could put in the date that it flooded. Also, just going through this process and looking, trying to create something as nice as, either a Google or Esri, got a much better appreciation for how difficult it is to really create a nice base map. So here's my application running in the Flex Viewer. A couple of customizations I did do. Added a graphic for one of the cities that is in my map. Also added the draw widget, obviously the edit widget, and the legend widget as well. On the map itself, some of the customization I did, you can see the highways and the major roads kind of stand out, especially at this scale. Did some custom labels, so using some state symbols. I thought this would look much better than actually having the text of the roads, of the highways, kind of pop out. I just thought it was much more readable. And again, at this scale, have the major towns identified and the airports. So basically, at this scale, just wanted to give the user a sense of kind of where they are in the world or where they are in the region. And I felt that, the bright red kind of asterisks for the sites, the flood sites, stood out very well against this map. I also included a very light yellow background in ArcMap. I wasn't sure if that was going to come through, but it did. And as we zoom in, I think it just helps a little bit, the labels kind of pop off a bit. One of the first things I did, though, was I looked at some of the data, especially when it came to symbology, and I did some cleanup. And just to give you an example, if you look at the major roads layer, some of the things identified as highways maybe technically were highways, but from a visual standpoint, they just seem to be kind of outliers. Some were on and off ramps, and some just seemed to be in the middle of nowhere. So I ended up just kind of merging that information with the local roads just to make a cleaner map. I did create a new file just in case the transportation department in the future didn't like that. Could always go back to the original file. But again, from a visual standpoint, when the focus is on urban flooding sites, I didn't want these kind of random artifacts, so to speak, being symbolized in this kind of orange color, just randomly popping the map. Because I think from a user standpoint, you might just be wondering, well, what is that? Do I need to worry about that? When I want the focus to be on the urban sites. So I zoom in, and as I zoom in, you'll start to see the cities take on a less, symbology takes on a less of a role, and then you start to see some initial streets, not all of them. I just went through and selected some of the streets that I wanted to show. And again, as you zoom in, you'll start to see more and more information. Again, adding a little bit more streets, again, to give the user a sense of where they are, and if they want to go somewhere else, is to help identifying where they need to go or where they need to move the map to if they're looking for a certain location in the city. And zoom in again, starting to get more information. Not all the streets yet, but again, more and more selection of streets. And finally, at this scale, you start to see kind of all the labels come through. I chose some different colors, trying to not take away from the urban sites. Most of my churches are gray, but I did, for example, for schools, I made those green along with the green label. And the hospitals are blue, again, with a very slight blue label color for the text. And again, the idea here is I didn't want all the labels to be gray or black. And this is the 4500 zoom level. And so again, this is the most detailed information or scale you get, and so everything is labeled here as well. So I'm going to zoom back out, and we're going to go ahead and add a label. The other thing that I did with the river, if you notice, it went from just being a line, and I tried to make it thicker and thicker as you got larger and larger scale. Again, just to try to make it kind of as close to real world as possible. So I'm just going to go here and edit. And we'll just put, I've already done this demo a bunch of times because I kept on messing up, so you see my old points here, but we'll just say flooding by railroad reported by me, and for the date, we'll just say it happened today. And we'll hit Okay, we'll close out, and there it is. I'm just going to zoom back out a little bit. So for lessons learned, this project took me probably 3 times longer than it should have. I kept on running into issues. A lot of them were my own doing. Of course, you don't realize that at the time. But the two major things that I realized, or that I did, that probably caused me some of these errors is, first, I created my own database connection. So rather than using the local host geodata that we did in the exercise, I just created my own. I just wanted something that was kind of, I didn't want my exercise lessons and my project files to kind of commingle. It would, at the end of the day, I learned it would not have mattered, but just for me being able to focus, I wanted to keep them separate, and so that might have caused some issues earlier on. Although the information, all the layers and files that I'm running on now are actually through the database connection that I made. So it looks like I was eventually able to get that working. The other issue that I ran into was with the projection. After reading the text, I had it in my. I just thought that everything had to be in the WGS 1984 Web Mercator projection, and so when I put everything at projection, for some, all the data ended up being in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and so basically had to go back to the very beginning and redo the entire project from scratch. And I didn't touch the projections, and things worked out. So that was just a lesson learned for me. So anyway, this is my project, and hopefully everyone has a good weekend.